Guys, Box of Gossip here, hope everyone's doing well. Quick video ahead of the Matchroom show tonight. Obviously I've discussed this on the podcast which went out earlier in the week, but haven't really done a set video. So I wanted to do just some quick final thoughts before the bell. Possibly we're going to focus on the main event, Tony Bellew versus BJ Flores. I think in the last 6 months it's been widely accepted Tony Bellew has become a world-class fighter. And certainly that he's able to operate in the top 10 space in the cruiserweight division. And I think for that reason, given the fact Bellew's coming off a career high win against Makabu, the widely accepted logic is that BJ Flores is going to lose this fight tonight. And when the fight was initially announced, I actually thought that would be the case as well. I was edging towards Tony Bellew, and really any comments that I've made in the lead up to this fight, I've kind of alluded to the fact I would pick in Tony Bellew's favour. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not going to pick in Tony Bellew's favour. But this morning, you can tell how interesting my weekend is. This morning I have just rewatched the BJ Flores versus Bebut Sumanov fight. And it actually makes for interesting viewing. It's quite a close fight, that. And for me, in the early rounds, BJ Flores is the better fighter in there. He's doing some things quite nicely. His jab is established very, very well. He throws nice shots off his jab. You know, he's got a decent hook, a decent right hand. And once he gets that jab well, he's actually not a terrible fighter at all. You know, I think people have maybe denigrated him and written him off a bit too soon. What is his undoing in that fight is Bellew Sumanov's movement. Sumanov's movement on the back foot in that fight is really, really impressive. I don't want to say he floats like a butterfly, but he dances very well in the ring. He keeps reins very well in the ring. And he makes BJ Flores look quite slow, quite wooden, quite heavy-footed. Sumanov shows some good footwork in there. And it's not just that it's like particularly technical amateur boxing footwork. It's the athleticism of that footwork. You know, it's the speed of the footwork. It's the distance that he's able to generate with a shuffle back. And I think that really caused problems for BJ Flores. Flores was sticking his jab out and missing. He was coming up short. He was unable to close down the ring, which Tony Bellew himself has alluded to in several interviews. And I just felt that in that fight, Sumanov taking the distance away from BJ Flores and making, BJ Flores miss and not allowing BJ Flores to get his jab working in the middle rounds was really the key to him winning that fight. But it's interesting because when Bellew Sumanov was a bit more flat-footed in the early rounds, when Sumanov was standing more in front of BJ Flores and, playing chess with BJ Flores, I think BJ Flores was the superior fighter. It was quite an impressive fight from Sumanov's perspective, watching it back. Sumanov was losing the fight, but he adapted. He brought something completely new. He evolved his game and fought a completely different style for sections of the fight, which is, he deserves immense credit for. There's very few fighters who can do that, and it's an indication of a very high-level operator. So credit to Sumanov for that. Now, my question here is, does Tony Bellew have the elements to his game that are going to cause BJ Flores problems? Bellew's alluded to the fact in multiple interviews that Flores couldn't cut down the ring on Sumanov, and if he couldn't cut down the ring on Sumanov, how's he going to cut down the ring on Bellew, because Bellew's got such great footwork? I've got to be honest, I've watched a lot of Tony Bellew's fights, and I don't necessarily see Bellew having that great footwork. Don't get me wrong, Bellew is an accomplished amateur, Bellew knows his way around the ring, but there's not that athleticism to his footwork that I saw evident in Bellew Sumanov. Bellew, for me, doesn't have the tactical foot speed or just the general pace to his game that I saw evident from Bellew Sumanov. Bellew, for me, can be a bit of a plodder. For me, he's quite heavy at cruiserweight. He carries a lot of fat in terms of coming into the ring at 15 stone or whatever he comes in at. And for me, his foot speed actually decreases throughout the course of the fight, and he can be quite laboured in the last 2 or 3 rounds, actually. Now, as Bellew famously said himself, I carry power. And because of that, he is, of course, a dangerous fighter. But Bellew's power, I mean, let's not get completely gassed on his power based on what happened with Makabu. Prior to that, we saw Mateusz Mastanek go the distance with Tony Bellew. We saw Nathan Cleverly in the wrong weight class go the distance with Tony Bellew. We saw Ike Chilemba go the distance twice with Tony Bellew, I believe. And, you know, there's multiple more examples of fighters who've gone the distance with Tony Bellew. Flores has shown a good chin. Flores is not an easy man to get out of there. And I suspect this fight is going to go rounds. And when it does go rounds, all of the Tony Bellew footwork, Tony Bellew speed, for me that decreases as the fight goes on. Bellew has never been what I would consider a superbly conditioned athlete. He's never been what I'd consider a high stamina fighter. And his work gets more laboured and more less speedy as the fight goes on. And it's just interesting because for me, if I look at the style of fight that BJ Flores brought in that Sumanov fight, I actually think it could be effective against Bellew. I don't think Bellew is going to have the footwork of Beyboot Sumanov or the speed or the athleticism of Beyboot Sumanov. I think Bellew is going to be in front of BJ Flores. I think Bellew is in love with his own power and he's going to be looking to throw those big power punches. Yeah, I think that's how this fight is going to go down. And I think that actually works very, very well from BJ Flores' perspective. I actually think that BJ Flores could well be effective if he's allowed to establish his jab, because I've always had concerns about Tony Bellew when he's fighting a fighter with a jab. If we remember back to that Nathan Cleverly fight at Cruiserweight, and Cleverly put in a really poor performance that night, but if we remember back to that fight, the rounds that Cleverly actually got his jab working, Cleverly won. If we look back to the Mateusz Masternek fight, the rounds that Masternek won in that fight was where he was able to get his jab established. Bellew, for me, is not a fighter who is really capable of blocking the jab. He's very open defensively, his chin straight up in the air, and someone who can get that jab going and going and going is going to be effective against him. Bellew's the kind of guy who I don't believe has got the footwork or the athleticism of Beyboot Sumanov. He's going to be in front of you and he's going to be throwing big punches. Someone who's patient, who can lean back, keep a high guard and counterpunch, can be effective against Tony Bellew and can catch Tony Bellew. And, you know, I've seen Tony Bellew hurt time and time again in fights, at light heavyweight and at cruiserweight. Tony Bellew is a guy who has been dropped. He's been down multiple times in his career, and he's right. He has got a great heart. He does have the ability to get back into fights, and he does have the ability to turn the tables after he has been hurt. But let me put it this way: I think BJ Flores, having watched him back, could well be capable of springing the upset here. I really do. I think that BJ Flores is actually a good fighter, but I think he's slow-footed and he's not the greatest mover. And I think a fighter like Sumanov and how he approached that fight really is going to cause him problems. A guy like Bellew who's going to stand in front of you and unload bombs and potentially be very open to the counterpunch and potentially be very open to the jab, which is how Flores likes to work, could be the kind of guy Flores could cause an upset against. Flores, what you need to do is work on that double jab, catch Tony with the jab, stop him from getting his own work off, and then use his power punches off that. You know, he needs to tuck up tight when Tony Bellew's throwing those big bombs, because Bellew's an inaccurate puncher historically. You know, he needs to just keep it high guard, move out of the way, see if he can make Bellew miss, and then catch him with a counter punch. Flores is, you know, there's a lot of negativity about Flores. People question his heart, people question whether he's got his celebrity lifestyle with his playboy mate David Hay. People question if he's going to be as gritty as Tony Bellew is when the going gets tough. And all of those are worthwhile questions. You know, all of those are not certainties if you're picking BJ Flores to win this fight. But Tony Bellew with the bookmakers is 1-9 on. I'm actually having a look. With Bet365 and Boyle Sports, he's 1-14 on. So in other words, you have to put £14 on to win a pound. The bookmakers are saying Tony Bellew is supremely likely to win this fight. They give Beyboot Sumanov very minimal chance. I'm having a look now. Bookmakers have Beyboot Sumanov as high as 8-1, and I suspect by the time the fight goes off, you'll be able to get a bit more than that if you shop around. And I look at this, and Tony Bellew is a guy, and I'll put my cards on the table. I have picked against Tony Bellew time and time again. I've never been sold on Bellew. I picked Cleverly to beat Bellew. I picked Masternek to beat Bellew. I picked Makabu to beat Bellew. Tony Bellew has proved me wrong time and time again. He's performed better than I expected time and time again. But we're looking at a guy here who I don't believe can block a jab. We're looking at a guy here who, for me, is a wildly inaccurate puncher who's very, very open to being counterpunched. We're looking at a guy who's been dropped multiple times in fights. And we're looking at a guy who, realistically, his only real fight at cruiserweight against a top 10 level cruiserweight, he was down in the first round and won the fight very quickly by stoppage, so that it didn't really develop into a full boxing test, if you like. So it's a fight for me that Tony Bellew deserves to be a favourite in. He is the bigger puncher. He's got the more momentum. He's got home advantage. He appears to have more heart. You know, there are a number of reasons Tony Bellew should be a favourite. But if I was pricing this fight, having watched it back, I'd have Tony Bellew something like a 4-7 favourite or an 8-15 favourite. You know, I'd have him just slightly above 1-2. But 1-14 for me is ludicrous. If you consider the deficiencies in Bellew's game, and if you consider some of the things that Flores does well, this does have the potential to be a competitive fight. This is a fight that I could see going rounds. And you know, Flores, whilst he may not be the most fleet of foot, whilst I certainly wouldn't be picking him to cause any problems against a guy like Alexander Usyk, who can move and be so evasive and be so fast on his feet, against a guy like Tony Bellew, he has the potential to get that jab working and to win rounds behind that jab. He's got the potential to land counter punches against a guy who can be a bit over-eager with his power and lunge in. And whilst I'm not saying I'm going to pick Flores to win the fight in a prediction fight, what I am saying is that at 8-1, I'll be having a pound or two on that, let's put it that way, because for me that price is too big, given what both guys bring to the table. Let me know your thoughts, people. I suspect this is going to be a more competitive fight than most people think. Tony Bellew's the kind of fighter who is improving and is performing at a higher level than I expected. He's proved me wrong time and time again, and he deserves to be a favourite in this fight. But for me, it's still competitive. BJ Flores is actually fairly decent when you look at some of the stuff he does in there. And there's still a few lingering doubts about some of the mistakes Tony Bellew makes in the ring for me. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Thanks very much.